how many of you live in North Idaho? Can I get a, yeah, right. Now, how many of you have ever been asked the question, why in the world do you live in North Idaho? All right, we have something in common. That's a question that I often get, and it's a kind of a strange question, but it usually comes after some discussion around my gender and sexuality or around the work that I do with the LGBT community. Now, my simple answer is, it's absolutely beautiful here. Why wouldn't you want to live here? But for me, it's not that simple. Despite being surrounded by all of this beauty, after moving here, I wasn't happy. Something was really missing. My tanks were being depleted every day, and I didn't know why. So to get to the why, we have to jump into the time machine and go back to December of 2008. When my wife and I decided to move to North Idaho. Now, we had visited family here a few times in Post Falls, and we really did fall in love with the natural beauty that surrounds us, and also the slower pace of life. My wife had been offered a great job opportunity, and my job was being phased out, so I was going to be in transition one way or another. We were living in a vibrant gay neighborhood on the north side of Chicago. We played in sports leagues with teams made up of mostly gay people. We could walk out our front doors and go to any number of stores and restaurants and coffee shops made up of, you guessed it, mostly gay people. You could say I was really living my life in this beautiful rainbow bubble. So knowing we would be making the move the following year, I decided it was time to do a little research. So I sat down at my computer and I typed into Google, gay life in North Idaho. Yeah. That was kind of my reaction, and some tears. What came up were stories around controversy and a history of hate and intolerance towards people of color and the LGBT community. So not exactly what I was hoping for, but we were headed this direction. Now fast forward June of 2009. We just sold our house. We attended our last neighborhood festival full of rainbows, packed up our 2 cars, and we headed west on Interstate 90. Direct shot from Chicago to Post Falls, Idaho. Now, driving through the mountains, this was the first time for me, and I was a little nervous. See, until this point, I was born and raised, lived my entire life in Illinois. So I'm a flatlander. So mountains were a little intimidating. But we were on our 3rd day, the last leg of the trip, and I was finally starting to relax and get used to the driving in the mountains and listening to music and just starting to get excited about what was to come for us. And all of a sudden, my driver's side window explodes. It just blew out. Shattered glass everywhere. I had it in my lap, in the car, in my hair. I was freaking out. I didn't know what happened. The only thing I could think of was that, oh my gosh, somebody just shot my window out. Like somebody figured out I was gay somehow, and they just shot at me. Now I know it's kind of a ridiculous story, and I found a place to pull over, and I did, and my wife followed behind. She ran up to the car and she said, "What happened?" And I said, "I think somebody just shot at me." She looked at me like I had 3 heads. And she said, "I don't think anybody shot at you. It was probably just a rock that got kicked up from that truck." And just as she said that, I looked up to see the taillights of an 18-wheeler pulling out ahead of us. And then later I found out that happens quite often here. I've replaced 3 windshields in 10 years of living here. Well, we cleared off the glass and we switched cars because I was really freaking out. My heart rate was up, and I was shaking, and I really was having a hard time pulling it together because I really believed in that moment that somebody tried to hurt me. And this was the danger of that Google search. This was the single story that I let myself believe, that because I was gay, moving to North Idaho, I wasn't going to be welcome here, and that I wasn't going to be safe here. Well, we pulled back on the highway, we made it to Post Falls safe and sound, and I'm pretty sure I took a really long nap after that. Now, I strongly identify with the LGBT community, and my world is largely shaped by my queer identity. And I use the term queer, and some people aren't used to that, and they don't understand quite why I use that term. Because that term has a history of people using it as a weapon against the LGBT community. But I use it because I can't distill this, my gender and sexuality, into nice, neat little boxes on some checklist. So the term queer for me represents this beautiful freedom that I have on the spectrum of gender and sexuality, and it just works for me. And here's the thing about labels or terms, is it's for me to take and use, and not for somebody else to put on me. Now, after living here for a short while, it became really clear that my happiness is directly related to my sense of belonging and being in connection with other people. Yet the longer I lived here, the more isolated I felt and the more desperate I felt. I was desperate to live in a place where I could just breathe a little deeper and feel a little more at home. My wife, she just wanted me to be happy, and so did I. But leaving Idaho to find those things would mean leaving her. And I love her very, very much. She is my person. So leaving was not going to be an option. So the only option I could really see was I was going to stay here and figure out how I was going to be happy. And so that's what I did. The first thing that I did was I went out and I found a really good therapist. I needed somebody to help me create and navigate a future that I didn't think was possible. And I bring this up because I think there's still a large stigma attached to asking for professional help. And it's something that we really need to normalize as part of positive health and well-being. The next thing that I did was I had to take off my blinders. Those blinders that kept me stuck in fear and isolation. Those blinders that kept me stuck in a story that focused on how I was different from everyone else, instead of the things that we had in common, like our love of being out on the lake, or enjoying really good coffee here, or just wanting to live our best lives. And as I started to pull back those blinders, I started to see people differently. I started to see people in the LGBT community, and I also started to see people who weren't. One pivotal conversation that I had early on was with Father Pat Bell, now Bishop Bell, and also now a very, very dear friend of mine. I went to talk with Pat about an LGBT group that I was organizing for them and their families and their friends, just a support group where we could be together. And I came dutifully prepared. I had a nice notebook with a shiny sticker and lots of information and educational pamphlets, because I thought I was there to educate him about us, the queer folks. And he took the folder, and he glanced at it, and then he set it, and he slid it across the table. I straightened up in my chair a little bit, and I was preparing for potential confrontation, because religious communities have not always been very kind to the LGBT community. So this was an important meeting for me. And what Pat did was he smiled, he leaned in, and he said, "Tell me more about who you are and about your experiences." And so I did. And then he deeply listened to what I had to say. He listened, and he saw me in a way that I desperately wanted to be seen in this community. And that was simply in all of my fullness, which means all of my queerness. I didn't have to leave anything at the door for him to accept me for who I was. Now, he could have stopped there and just said, "Hey, thanks for stopping by, and I wish you well on your journey," but he didn't. He took it a step further, and he showed up. He showed up for me and for my LGBT community. He showed up, and he let us lead the way, and he just supported us, and he didn't try to take over. He wanted to get a glimpse of life through our rainbow lenses. He wanted to do this so he could be a better friend, a better ally, and a better religious leader. Now, in June of 2016, 49 people were killed at Pulse, a gay nightclub in Orlando, Florida. Now, to most people, this was pretty horrific to hear about, but it didn't really affect their everyday lives. But for me and my LGBT family, this just triggered another state of hypervigilance and fear, because it reminded us that we are a target of hate. Not long after the Pulse shooting, I was walking in my neighborhood, and one of my neighbors was mowing his lawn. Now, he just happened to be an old straight white guy. I know it's rare to find in North Idaho. But he got off his lawnmower, and he crossed the street, and he gave me a hug. And with a tear in his eye, he simply said, "I am so sorry to hear about what happened in Orlando. And I know this must be really hard for you and your friends." A few days after that, another one of my neighbors, who also just happens to be a straight white lady, also hard to find here, she brought us a plate of cookies. She also just wanted to say, "I'm so sorry to hear about what happened in Orlando, and I want you and your wife to know that my family is thinking about you, and if you need anything, you let us know." Now, to most people, this may seem like a very small gesture, but to me, and in my hypervigilance and fear, it meant the world to me. It opened my heart a little bit more to being seen and being supported and feeling a little more safe. Out of a sense of grief and a need to come together, some of my friends and I organized a peace and justice vigil down at McEwen Park. And the intent was to remember and honor those people who lost their lives in Orlando, but also we wanted to denounce any kind of hate in our own community. That event brought out our mayor, city council members, law enforcement, clergy member, our friends, our families, and especially it brought together the LGBT community. We needed to connect, and that day we really did. Now, and a couple hundred people showed up to say, "We see you, we support you, and we stand with you." This was really a profound experience of hearts opening and connections being made. Because of my queer identity, I tend to see the world through glasses that have rainbow-tinted lenses. It's just how I interpret and filter my experiences. And also because of my queer identity, I've been living on the margins of gender most of my life. And when you live on the margins, your brain can get stuck in a state of hypervigilance, that fight, flight, or freeze mode. Like what happened when my window blew out. Or what happens any number of times that I use a public restroom, and I walk in with the sole purpose of using the toilet and washing my hands. Like most people. But I'm only told, "Hey, you're in the wrong bathroom," or "Get out." Or what's particularly scary is when I'm walking into a public women's bathroom and somebody's husband or boyfriend yells at me from behind to stop because they think that I'm going into the wrong place because I don't match what they think I should look like in our culture to be able to use that bathroom. I hold my breath a little bit and I stiffen up and I just pray to God nobody grabs me from behind. This is a kind of hypervigilance that I live with most of my days. That vigil at McEwen Park was profound for me because it also showed me that there are a lot of people here who really see me and who really care about me in all of my identity. My tanks are starting to fill up more and more every day, and they're filling up with belonging, purpose, and definitely happiness. I know that there will always be people here who would rather I not live here. because of my identity or simply because I moved from somewhere else. But I'm not going anywhere. This is my home, and this is where we live. I am a lesbian. I am somebody who doesn't conform to our cultural norms of gender. I am also a wife. I'm a daughter who's grieving the loss of her mother. I am a leader, and I'm a teacher, and I'm a friend. I'm also a part of you. I'm the part of you that wants to belong. I'm the part of you that wants to be kind and compassionate. I'm the part of you that struggles. And I'm the part of you that wants to find happiness. As I close, I would invite you to go out and share your stories. Now, I don't share my story with everybody because I don't think everybody is ready to hear my story. And I guard my heart very carefully. And I'm very intentional about who I let into my heart and who I have those kinds of conversations with. And I would encourage you to do the same. But go share your stories with one another with these simple reminders that I've learned from this journey. Take off your blinders and lean into one another. Get curious about somebody's story with the intent of knowing them and not changing them. Listen deeply and unconditionally, even when it's uncomfortable. And finally, open your heart to experience life through somebody else's lenses. Well, as for me, I will continue to live in all of my fullness, which means all of my queerness, and I'll also continue to share my story, and I will open my heart to your story. Because when I do those things, I really do find happiness in unexpected places. Thank you.